Hello, in this video I'm going to talk about where can you cycle on using an electric bicycle, in short known as e-bike, and how to cycle in a safe way and what are the rules you need to follow when cycling on an e-bike. The first thing I'm going to talk about is where to cycle. According to the LTA, there are three types of paths that e-bicycles can cycle on: cycling paths, shared paths, and Park Connector Network (PCN). Cycling paths are distinctive paths which are usually painted with red color, and bicycle logos are also painted on them to distinguish them from the pavements or walkways beside them, so as to warn pedestrians not to walk on them. Pedestrians may cross the cycling path if they need to, and usually there are signs to tell the cyclists that they need to look out and give way to pedestrians crossing the cycling path. But what I see is the cyclists just cycle past the pedestrians without stopping to give way, and instead the pedestrians have to look out and wait for the cyclists to cycle past them before they cross the cycling paths. Shared paths are paths which bicycles, including motorized bicycles and scooters, can cycle on and pedestrians can walk on. They are usually painted with broken red lines on both sides of the path. They are also painted with the bicycle and pedestrian logo together. When you are cycling on a shared path, you have to be more of a lookout for pedestrians walking in front of you or crossing your path, and try to avoid them. Or if they are blocking the entire path, you can ring your bicycle bell to alert them, and they will move to one side to leave space for you to cycle through. The PCN, which stands for Park Connector Network, is a network of paths that links parks, natural and recreational sites all over Singapore together. PCN paths are painted with the PCN's marking on the path. Both cyclists and pedestrians are allowed to use the PCN paths. If there's a line and the PCN logos is on one side and the pedestrian logos is on the other side, cyclists must only cycle on the side where the PCN logos are drawn. If there's no line or marking drawn, then you can cycle on any side of the path. In all three paths that I have just said, the speed limit is only 25 kilometers per hour. Whether it is motorized or non-motorized bicycle or scooter, also known as PMD. Anyway, the legal speed limit for motorized bicycles or motorized scooter is already capped at 25 kilometers per hour by LTA. But what if the route you want to go has neither of the three paths in between? That is when you have to cycle on the roads. Speaking about roads, e-bicycles are legally allowed to cycle on the same roads that cars, motorcycles, and lorries travel on. It may seem dangerous to cycle on the roads where cars and large vehicles are driving past you so quickly, but as long as you cycle on the most left hand side of the road or the most right hand side of the road, provided if the road is a one-way road, you are fine. You cycle on the most left hand side of the road as close to the curb as possible, but avoid cycling over those small drain grating covers at the side of the road, as sometimes they are not closed properly or are uneven and may cause you and your bicycle to fall. What I do is cycle on those double yellow lines or zigzag lines that are painted on the most left hand side of the road. When you are cycling on the road, look far ahead for any potholes, cracks, or obstacles such as rubbish, tree branches, stones on the road, so that you have enough time to react and avoid those obstacles. But do not suddenly swerve to your right to avoid those obstacles, as there might be vehicles to the right of you. Once you notice there's an obstacle in front of you, turn your head to the right to look over your right shoulder and check if there are any vehicles following you close behind. If there is, let them pass before slightly shifting to your right to avoid the obstacle. If you are already approaching the obstacles, then there are still vehicles behind you. Use your hand signal to inform the vehicles that you are going to stop. Then stop and let them pass first. Some potholes or obstacles are pretty small that you can just slow down and ride over them. So basically, cycling on the road is not too difficult or scary as long as you keep to the most left hand side of the road. But what if you face a traffic light controlled junction where you need to go straight, turn left or right, or make a U-turn? Of course you can do it the way the motor vehicles are supposed to do, that is to position yourself on the correct lane based on the arrow markings on the lanes of the road before the traffic lights junction. But motorized bicycles are much slower than those vehicles and do not have turn signals to inform other motorists that we want to filter left or right. We can use our hand signals, but other vehicles usually don't like to give way, because after the vehicle let you, the cyclist, into his or her lane and in front of him or her, he or she need to drive the vehicle very slowly behind your bicycle and cause the other vehicles behind to also drive very slowly, and that is what we call as hogging the traffic. If this is the leftmost lane, it's definitely okay, but not for the second, left, but not for the second leftmost or the rightmost lane. For turning left at the traffic light junction, this is the simplest. You just have to keep to the most left hand side of the road as usual. For going straight, if the leftmost lane of the road is painted with a left turn and straight going arrow, you turn your head to the right over your shoulder just when you are to approach the junction to see if there are any vehicles turning left. If there is no straight going arrow on the leftmost lane, then what I advise is to turn left and go up into the pedestrian waiting area, then use the pedestrian crossing in front to cross. After you cross, wait for the pedestrian crossing to your right to turn green, so that you can use the crossing to go down and continue riding the road. If the traffic lights junction has or have pedestrian island or islands, use the zebra crossing or signalized pedestrian crossing to cross to the pedestrian island, then wait at the island waiting area to wait for the main pedestrian crossing to turn green before crossing the junction. For turning right, when you approach the junction, turn left and go up into the pedestrian waiting area, then use the pedestrian crossing in front of you to cross. After you cross the first pedestrian crossing, cross another pedestrian crossing to your right. Then to your right there is a pedestrian crossing. Use that pedestrian crossing to go down and continue riding the road. Sometimes the pedestrian crossing on another side will turn green first, so the order of using the pedestrian crossings may be different. For you turning, when you approach the junction, turn left and go up into the pedestrian waiting area. To your right there is a pedestrian crossing. Use that crossing to cross, then immediately continue riding down the road. If the traffic lights junction has or have pedestrian island or islands, use the zebra crossing or signalized pedestrian crossing to cross to the pedestrian island, then wait at the island waiting area to wait for the main pedestrian crossing to turn green before crossing the junction. However, some T or cross traffic lights junction have one or two pedestrian crossings missing, or even don't have any pedestrian crossing at all, probably because they have overhead bridge or underpass nearby. For those junctions, you either have to cross more pedestrian crossings than usual, or use the overhead bridge or underpass if there is any. Talking about overhead bridges and underpasses, most of them do have bicycle ramps or even lifts, but you have to dismount and push your bicycle. But there are still those that do not even have bicycle ramps. They only have staircases which are pretty tiring to carry a bicycle up. That's why I prefer and encourage you to use the pedestrian crossings across the roads rather than bridges or underpasses, unless it is necessary, such as in situations like you have to cross expressways or it is a shorter route to cross the overhead bridge than to use the pedestrian crossing. For junctions at minor roads, car parks, car park roads or private roads, it is easier to filter right, so you can position yourself and your bicycle on the correct lane based on the arrow markings on the lanes. To ride to the ground floor of a block to park your bicycle, you have to ride up the pavement. In many cases, where you have no choice but to ride on the pavement for a short distance, ride slowly and look out carefully for LTA enforcement officers, or as we riders call them, green men, patrolling around. In private compounds, the green men cannot enter, so you can cycle peacefully inside, but do adhere to the property and security rules. The green men usually like to patrol in places like the town centres, near the MRT stations, outside shopping malls and on cycling lanes. Yes, correct. Even cycling lanes. They also check the e-bikes to make sure that they are not modified illegally or exceed the 20 kg unladen weight limit